Once again, I would like to welcome you all, and I promise we did not bring you here to suffer from sitting, but this is what Malcolm X wanted us to celebrate his commemoration and see how other people in the other world suffering. I would like to quote Dr. Abdul Mawgood when he said that walk next to the wall. This is since Nasser, Sadat, and Mubarak. We got only 1 year since Morsi was elected, but now we are walking inside the wall. I would like to ask Dr. Dardiri to link between the quote of Malcolm X, which says, there is nothing in our book, the Quran, that teaches us to suffer peacefully. Our religion teaches us to be intelligent. The other quote I would like to mention, I quoted Malcolm, be peaceful, be courteous, obey the law, respect everyone, but if someone puts his hand on you, send him to the cemetery. I am here between you, and I would like you to take this opportunity to ask our valued guest speakers and ask him as much as you want, but my office here is in H building, 4th floor, H4143. So please answer.
Starting with these difficult questions now. Thank you, Dr. Nadia. Again, any religion that calls for accepting the status quo is not a good religion. I believe in a religion that invites me to change the status quo, especially when the status quo is full of injustice and full of oppression. And I think when Malcolm speaks of the Quran, the holy book for Muslims, a unique thing about the Quran is that it promises those who accept oppression to be punished in the hereafter. It's an amazing injunction. It tells people, لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. Do not oppress and do not accept oppression. And that's a unique characteristic that Malcolm refers to. The Quran teaches people resistance. And no one should accept resistance. I don't know about the other statement of Malcolm, whether I would send them to the cemetery or send them to jail. That's different. We can disagree on that, because what is happening now in Egypt, is a very complicated issue. What do you do with the military? When the military kills thousands, imprisons thousands, imprison girls, rape women in jail, when it imprisons minors, when it sentences 529 to death in less than 4-hour judiciary session. What do you do when your father is in jail and your brother is running away and your sister is raped? What do you do? I am troubled by it. Many people in Egypt now are saying we cannot accept the status quo. We have to fight them with the way they fight us. I personally have a problem with that. Yes, some people may say, but you're really submissive to the status quo. No, I am not. I am resisting to the status quo. But I don't want to use violence or counter violence for the violence that is being imposed against me by the military or by the police. I would like to use peaceful means. I believe that peacefulness is a strategic position that the majority of Egyptians have taken. For 9 months now, we are in the streets of Egypt every day. And you know, because the police arrests us during the day, we march 5 times in the day, so that sometimes they cannot arrest us in one of those 5 times. So we march 7 o'clock when students are going, high school students or university students are walking to the university, they march against the military. Then there is a noon, then there is afternoon and evening, and there is a night marches. If you watch Al Jazeera for Egypt, you will find the marches for the past 9 months on a daily basis. But in spite of this, violence happens against them by the police or the police thugs. It is, Professor Nadia, it is a very complicated issue. The problem is once you start using counter-violence, then you become like them. And once you become like them, you lose the moral high ground. The fact that I was speaking in the British Parliament just a few weeks ago, and it was the House of Lords. And after I done with my presentation, a member of the House of Lords stood up and said, "Thank you for your insistence on peacefulness, because now you've won the moral high ground. It's only time until you win the political alternative." And I think we're determined. The majority, I represent a coalition of many different parties, many. It's called the National Coalition, the Anti-Coup Pro-Democracy National Coalition, and we're determined to peacefulness. I know sometimes young people cannot take it any longer, and sometimes people have to deal with them the same way as they're dealing with them. I personally think that peacefulness is stronger, way stronger than fighting back, because when we fight back, then we become like them, and I'd rather not be like them. I'd rather to be different, because what I want is I want their own freedom, even those who kill us, because those, when Egyptians kill Egyptians, the killers have lost their humanity, and my function as a human being is to bring their humanity back so that all of us in Egypt can live in a state of freedom and justice. But the issue is open. Lots of people in Egypt are troubled about that. Thank you.
Hi. I agree that peace is very hard to come by, especially because Egyptians right now feel extremely oppressed. Even after the first elected president, they didn't feel like he was doing much. They felt that the revolution was failing. So I understand the violence that comes, especially from young students who are being killed, their sisters, their mom are being kidnapped. My question is, do you think then the solution, the peaceful solution, would be people to go to the streets again and revolt against the oppression? Right, just like 25th of January. I do think that people should start going to the square and revolting against the oppression that's coming from the military, especially, and the police. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Maya, for this question. And this, Maya is a young Egyptian living here. She can easily say, hey, forget about Egypt. I can easily say, I can easily get a job somewhere here and say, hey, forget about Egypt. But I am a human being before being Egyptian. And as a human being, I need to care for the suffering of all human beings, not only Egyptians. I worked very hard for the Somalian crisis. I worked very hard for the Afghani crisis, for the Syrian crisis, for the Palestinian crisis. I am a human being, and I love to work as a human being. You know, Maya, I am getting old. And it is Maya and Maya's generation that have to work hard to create a better Egypt. Maya and her generation need to do the best they can to bring democracy back to Egypt. Democracy is the only alternative. The military dictatorship, we lived under military rule for 60 years. What did it produce? Corruption, poverty, sickness, no education, no medical services. I strongly supported the young leaders. I was in a TV program 2 days ago, Russia Today, and on the other line there was a young Egyptian from anti-Egyptian student, anti-coup Egyptian student. And the young student, he was really not a student. He was young and he was still going to school, but he spoke as a professor of justice and freedom. He said, we will never submit to the status quo. We will resist it by all means necessary. You remember Malcolm X when he used by all means necessary, until democracy is back. And I strongly support your statement. I strongly support the work. I believe the military will never yield to the people of Egypt until the people of Egypt force the military. There are no two powers will work with one another until the will of the people. The military has a function. It protects the borders. The military cannot be involved in politics. I believe if Egyptians want to live a life full of peace and justice, they need to work hard to bring both of them to the streets of Egypt and then to the streets in the Arab world. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, we'll open it up now to the floor. If you have a question, please stand up and I'll try to get you a microphone. We also have a microphone there. Okay. Tell us quickly who you are and ask your question.
My name is Johnny Emil, and I'm a student here with Dr. Matthew. My question is, the Holy Quran says that, in addition to what you said, the Holy Quran says that death, even death is better than oppression. Okay? So it's very significant to fight against oppression. However, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for many years, he did not launch war and physical violence against his enemies. But at one point, he said, no more running. We ain't running no more. We're going to fight if we have to fight. So your position of passive resistance, I can relate to it. However, history has shown that there's no revolution without blood. Thank you.
Thank you. No revolution without blood. I remember when I was preparing for this presentation, I remember Malcolm who's saying there is a possibility for a bloodless revolution. And the fact that President Barack Obama, who is associated one way or another with the African American experience in this country, that he is the president of America, is a good example that the possibility of a bloodless revolution is there. The fact, you see the difference between Prophet Muhammad and the wars took place. It was a war between different factions. But when we're talking about Egypt, they're all Egyptians. And it is one group that is trying. You see the Syrian scenario, where more than 100,000 people got killed now. About 7 million are refugees. We don't want to create that situation. We are a socio-political movement. The Freedom and Justice Party that I speak for, it is Foreign Relations Committee, is a political movement. And in politics, you cannot use violence. Those who use violence are the military. They kidnapped the president. So the real terrorist in Egypt now is the military. And you know what the military is trying to do? It's trying to have fake democracy. And the defense minister who kidnapped the president is running for office. And you can imagine the results. Under oppression, he will be the president. So what do? Do you fight? Some people say you have to fight back. I personally don't call it passive resistance. I call it positive resistance. I call it active resistance. I call it non-violent militant resistance. Anything less than killing or using a bullet is accepted in this resistance. You can have the strikes, sit-ins, you can do many things. We don't want any Egyptian blood to be spilled. I care from my Muslim background. Islam teaches me that the house of Kaaba in Mecca, if one person dies, it is better for the house of Kaaba to be demolished and not one human being's life to be wasted. So the human value, Islam teaches me that the killing of one person is like the killing of whole of humanity. So Islam teaches me that positive resistance, never accept oppression, but positive resistance is better than a violent resistance. And these two ways are two alternatives that are being tried in different parts of. Thank you.
My question is, do you believe, although Malcolm X and Martin Luther King had different religious views, do you believe that their ultimate goal for humanity was the same?
Good question.
Two parts of Malcolm X.
Yeah, maybe three parts.
Two parts of Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Madagascar.
Yeah. You see, for Martin Luther and Malcolm X, I think their goal was freedom for all. They just used different techniques. Whether the religious background influenced their attitudes, I think so. I think Malcolm was. Let me take this back. I think both of them were very hard moving in the streets, and both of them were trying to dismantle the slavery institution. Whether they had the same goals or not 100%, I think they had the same goal of liberating the African Americans, but I think Malcolm was more of international rather than Malcolm X was more of an international, had more international perspective than that of Martin Luther. Martin Luther was focusing more on the American situation. Malcolm X was talking about the worldwide. In fact, he wanted to go to the United Nations to do something against the United States government in this regard. So there can be similarities and there can be differences too. Yes.
I wanted to ask, I noticed there is tension between Islamic people of Islamic religion and non-Islamic people in Egypt. And we're focusing so much on the militants in like Egypt. Yet down here we have like this little people fighting between themselves, and then we're trying to we're trying to get to the bigger problem, but the smaller problem down here is that the people themselves are not in harmony to even fight towards that big goal. So I would like to understand how the people in the military definitely do not like, it's not a family thing, it's not a father with a son gets into the military, it's this people in your let's say community, they're the same people who get into this military in the first place. So I think the bigger fight is big then within the people and not against the military.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. If I understand you right, the military, Egyptian military, is coming out of Egypt. So why is the fight? It seems that Egyptians are fighting with one another. On the surface, yeah, it looks the same. It looks, I agree with you on the surface when you look. But when you study it deeply, you will find that the military in Egypt has become a class of its own. The military in Egypt now controls about 50% of the economy. The military of Egypt now, so the fathers, his sons will become either officers in the military or officers in the police. So you see, they're inheriting the leadership and the prestige and the privileges. And this applies to lots, because that is what dictatorship teaches. Dictatorship teaches keeping the status quo. And that's why the military now constitutes, with the police, with the judiciary, constitute no more than 5%, and they're getting almost everything in the country, and the majority of the people are not. You may find just one police officer in one large family, and that person has his villa, has a couple of cars, has lots of money in the account, but the rest of the family is not really enjoying that much of a privilege. So even within the family itself, you will find people are not happy within the family itself. But unfortunately, the military in Egypt has become a class against the rest of the Egyptian people.
My question is more or less about that this war can go on for so long, and when it finally reaches that there's no oppression, what if there's no natural resources left? Like what if there's no water because everyone's running out of water, and then how are you going to live when there's no resources?
Yes, thank you. So hopefully you're not asking us to accept the status quo. Because many people say, where are you going? What are you doing? That means, hey, accept the status quo, meaning accepting oppression. The problem is oppression does not solve the problem. The oppression keeps us suffering more and more. Oppression will not allow me even to go back and teach. And if I teach and I say something wrong against the government, most likely I will end up in jail. And if I go to the Egyptian jails, I wish they were good for animals, not for human beings. In one room, 4 by 4, they put 40 human beings. You know what they do? They sleep on their side. And only 50% of the sleep, the other 50 stand against the wall for the rest of the night. They sleep a couple of hours, then they wake, and the other people waking up, they go to sleep. And the food they get is not good for animals. And the treatment, when you know where their families go and visit them, the suffering they go through, is standing in line. Even one person was standing in line in the hot weather in Egypt, and he was waiting for hours to visit his wife. He got a sunstroke and he died. It is that oppression that we're not talking about American jails. We're talking about terrible jails in Egypt that are not good for animals, not for human beings. And the situation is not going to be solved with those who are in the top are going to get richer. Those who are down there are going to get poorer. I know people, my neighbors, not far away, who live the whole month on $40. How can you live on $40? So there is no, the survival even. That's why when we moved to the streets of Egypt, we used to say survival, freedom, social justice, and the human dignity. Because we didn't have any of those. And this is what we really wanted to have. And I think it is better we pay the price. It may be a heavy price, but it is better to pay the price and be free than to accept the status quo and remain colonized or slave.
Hello, my name is Kevin Nance. I'm from the Socialist Club here at UCC. You mentioned earlier about the the wonders that the people of Egypt have created. I think that holds really true today. That the people of Egypt have created great wealth for their country. The people in America have also created great wealth. And it seems that this whole thing is a battle against the people who have taken this wealth, taken the privilege, and put in a state to enforce that wealth and enforce that privilege. I think we've all been really inspired by the events in Egypt, the two revolutions, and it's really amazing to see. How long has Mubarak been there? 30 years? And
30 years.
20-some days to get kicked out, and it's really amazing to see. But I mean, the thing is that the revolutions aren't over. 17 million people rose up against the state in Egypt as well, against Morsi for rights, for dignity, for the control of the wealth. And it doesn't seem like this is finished. My question is, do you think that these struggles can be that there can be peace, that there can be justice, that there can be social justice while keeping a capitalist framework?
I see. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for thanking the Egyptian people for having two revolutions in 3 years. And I'm telling you, we're going to have the third revolution coming very soon. We're working for the third revolution, believe me. But we read them differently. We call them revolution and then counter-revolution. The first revolution was on January 25th. The second revolution, I consider it as a counter-revolution because it was mobilized by the deep state, by the police, by the military. There were police and military people in Tahrir Square on the second, what you call second revolution, which was June 30th. I consider it, and many people in Egypt now consider it as a counter-revolution to bring back Mubarak regime, and that's why Mubarak is likely to leave jail. All Mubarak people are likely to leave jail. Now there is the stages being prepared for the anti-revolution to gain. And the people of Egypt, majority, lots of people in Egypt now are working against the counter-revolution, and they're determined to have the third revolution, if you like to call it two revolution previously, or I would like to call it the second wave of revolution, to bring back the same ideals that we worked for. Survival, because now there is no survival. There is no economic progress in Egypt. Now there is no freedom. You know, you can't move around freely. You cannot even express. You know, there was a constitution referendum, and some people, many of us boycotted it. Some people wanted to vote no. They were arrested and put in jail just for saying no to a constitutional process. So in Egypt, there is no survival, there is no economic, no tourism, no social justice, because the rich are still getting richer, and there is no freedom, and there is no human dignity. You cannot imagine. You cannot imagine the suffering that people are going through. You know, when they take your father, or your mother, or your brother or sister to jail, and you are, because you love your family, you would like to visit them, you cannot imagine the suffering you go through. If you're allowed to visit them, you travel for 3-4 hours in this sun, and you stand in the line for a couple of hours. And you know what you end up doing? You end up seeing them for 10 minutes. It is terrible. It is a crime against humanity. And that's why I encourage the socialist club. And those clubs that are working for freedom and justice for all is to join hands with the young Egyptian students who would like to have a better future for themselves and a better future for the world. I'm very optimistic that the coming days, months, weeks, whatever it takes, we're determined to bring democracy back so that we can live in peace, have freedom, and have justice in Egypt, inshallah.
My name is Misty, and I was born here, and I was born free, whatever you call that, but I'm half African American, and thank God for my brother Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. But my question is, maybe you don't know it, but maybe you can answer it. Africa, that's where Egypt is. Africa has been fighting this fight forever, not just now, not just Egypt, but 1700s, 1600s. My half of people been whipped and enslaved. Do you think this will ever come a time where we will all be free? I mean, all just
Okay.
whatever, if you can.
Yeah. I will try to answer. Do I think will it ever happen? I believe it should. It depends on us. Are we willing to pay the price? That is the question we need to ask. If we're willing to pay the price, we can all become free. The world is good enough for all of us. Not only for particular race, not only for particular culture or particular, we all can live together. We can live together and appreciate our differences. Look at the room here. Look at the different colors, the different languages, the different genders. That is the beauty of humanity. We're different, but we're human beings. And we can work together. We have to be able to live together. The Egyptian story is a very telling story. We had Jews and Christians in Egypt, and we've been living in the past hundreds of years together. We can do it again and again. It's up to us. We need to welcome the other. We need to smile. Can you all smile now? Yeah, interesting. That is the good beginning. If we can keep smiling at each one and we embrace one another, we welcome one another. But remember, we will be different. And let us agree to disagree. We can do a lot to the world. Thank you.
I have a question. Do you want to? No.
Okay, Dr. Abdul Mahmoud, I just want to say I'm recording you too, but I'm different from your other students.
Thank you.
So my question is, I read a lot about the Egyptian brotherhood system, and I know since the time of Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb, they have been going through a lot of difficulties. So the first question is, why is Saudi Arabia, which is an Islamic government, going against the Islamic brotherhood in one side? The US is in support of democracy, and yet still the brotherhood won an election through democracy, and yet still the US is against the Muslim Islamic brotherhood. Thank you.
Are you recording yourself too?
Yes.
Good. Good. Yeah, this man wants to put me in trouble. What can I do? That is the good thing about the classroom, is we put each other in trouble. And I will answer you frankly. Why Saudi Arabia is a dictatorship? Saudi Arabia can be easily understood. Why is it standing against a democracy in Egypt? Because Saudi Arabia fears a democracy within an Islamic framework will be prosperous, progressive, and spreading peace, justice, and freedom next door. And Saudi Arabia is a dictator, is a monarchy. And the family of Saud, the name of it, it is just one family controlling the whole area and controlling vast wealth, vast resources of oil. So Saudi Arabia is afraid that people of Saudi Arabia, when they see a democracy in Egypt, they will demand a democracy in Saudi Arabia. And once they demand a democracy in Saudi Arabia, that means the end of the monarchy. That means the end of corruption. That means the end of dictatorship. And they don't want this to happen. That is number one. Number two is very difficult. Why is America supporting Saudi Arabia, that is supporting the coup? And why is America, or certain sections of the American administration, is supporting dictatorship in Egypt? Do you want me to leave this question to you to answer, or you want me to share my? You want me to talk? You want to put me in trouble, it seems. It is sad fact that America is standing against its own ideals. President Barack Obama, when he visited us in Cairo, he promised us mutual understanding and mutual respect. And he promised us democracy is the only way to go. We had a democracy. Why did the American administration support the military coup? Why is the military administration still giving money to the military coup in Egypt? Billions of Egyptian pounds. It's a big question. I think it is unethical. I think it is wrong. And I call upon the US administration to stop it. Stop aiding dictatorship. United States supported dictatorship in Egypt for 60 years. What happened? A revolution. But what was good about that revolution? It was not against America. It was against corruption in Egypt. But now the second revolution is saying, who is supporting the military dictatorship? It's America. I am afraid, as a universal human being, that we're going to lose the people of Egypt. The people of Egypt are not going to be appreciative of what America stands for. The people of Egypt will say, stop your hypocrisy. You promised us democracy. But what we see is hypocrisy. By supporting the military coup, I believe it's a crime against humanity. It's a crime against the ideals of the founding father of this country. I love the cultural system in this country. I love the freedom in this country. I love the fact that I come to the school with no police asking me, where are you going or what are you going to say? I love it. Why can't we have the same in Egypt? Why is the American administration supporting dictatorship in the Arab world? It's a question. I will leave it to you to do a research paper for Professor Matthew Palumbo.
My name is Forrest. I'm a student here. Doctor, first I want to tell you I appreciate that you mentioned you're a politician of necessity as opposed to a politician of ambition. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Also, the courage you have to publicly speak about these things is really impressive. My question is that as a typical American in this country, my source of information is the media. And there seems to be a pretty strong anti-Islamic bend on almost all the media that I have access to. How can I get information like you're giving me? To know what's really going on? The other question is, what can I do as a typical American in this country to support a cause such as what's going on in Egypt?
Let me say thank you for this question. That is a very important question. I'm not happy with how the media is portraying Islam or Muslims, or even the struggle in Egypt or the struggle in different parts in the Arab world. There is a problem. I wrote my PhD dissertation on the relationship between Europe and Islam. And there has always been a confrontation between the Muslim world and the Europeans. And in my dissertation, the last chapter, I spoke about a third alternative. What happens is the relationship between Europe and the Muslim world is like this. Muslims here control Europeans. Then the Europeans get stronger, and then they control the Muslims. And then the Muslims get stronger and control, and lots of human suffering is going. I say we have to stop this. This formula of us versus them has to come to an end. And instead of this, we need to be this. And it is a lot of work. It requires you and me to put hands together, and so many people of you to put hands together so that we create a mutual understanding. The reason why I love this program is because it creates that mutual understanding. It builds these new bridges of understanding. We have a lot in common. We have 90% in common. You want a freedom, I want a freedom. You want justice, I want justice. You want fairness, I want fairness. You want to have a good family, I want to have a good family. If I am sick, I want to get a treatment in a nice facility. You do the same. We have percent differences. Can't we work on 90%? And we can agree to disagree. The problem is some in the American media, and I'm be courageous enough to call them Islamophobes. They hate Islam. And they don't want us to get along with one another. If we're left alone, we'll be able to build more bridges of understanding. And what they do, they create prejudice. Prejudice leads to hate. Hate leads to violence. People on both sides are fearful of one another, are prejudiced against one another, and that's why they can easily commit violence to one another. We need to stop this violence. But we cannot stop this violence until we dispel prejudice, until we put an end to fear. You're a human being. I am a human being. I love you as my brother in humanity. That is what matters. I don't care about what religion I have or you have. I don't care about what color I have or you have. I don't care about what language you have or I have, but we're both of us are human beings and we can work together. It is very unfortunate that some media outlets, not all of them, but large number of them when it comes to Islam, are still preying on this fear so that either they get listened to or because fear. What happens when fear? They say when the Soviet Union collapsed, the military industrial complex needed another enemy. And that's why they wanted to create Islam. You know, when you have fear outside, you have peace inside. But that is not the best alternative. We can have peace inside and peace outside. It is a lot to be told about the media. What are alternative resources? Of course, thanks to social media. I am happy to share my email and my Facebook information. In fact, I will leave my card here with Professor Matthew, in case please share my email with anyone. I will be happy to share my email with any one of you. My Facebook information. I will be happy to connect you with the students, with pro-democracy students in Egypt who told me, please, tell the Americans what we're suffering from, and I'm sure that people like you will come forward for this regard. Again, now there is Al Jazeera America. It's not only in English, but is in America. It is, I think it is a cable, a channel you can listen to. There are also some good programs in America. I'm not saying all American media is prejudiced, but there are some, and one has to be selective. I know we're busy. I know we don't have a lot of time to be selective, but also attending these seminars, attending this academic discussion, I think we'll be able, and always try to resist to be told what to believe in. You have to resist it. You have to be critical. Thank you. You have to be critical of what you listen to. When you watch the media, ask the question, who said what, to whom, under what circumstances? Who's benefiting from this negative propaganda? And once you can do this, I think we'll be able, intelligent people like you and like all of you here and in other parts of the world can get together. We have to work together. We cannot. The moment we are working against one another, we all lose. United. Remember what Malcolm X used to say. United, we stand. Divided, we fall. And I used to love chanting this in the streets of Pittsburgh. That was the question about media and Islamophobia. What was the other question?
What can we do here to help the cause there?
Yeah, but one thing is if you can join Facebook with other students in Egypt. There are lots of websites, lots of Facebooks. That is one thing. Second is if you can read critically of what comes out. If you can also read Al Jazeera net, it publishes articles about the situation in Egypt. If you can there are lots of things. I may not remember all what can be done now, but there are lots of things can be done. I will be happy if I am around. Don't hesitate if you belong to a club, a socialist club, or whatever club, if you belong to a church, or if you belong to Islamic center or a mosque, and you would like to invite me, I will be more than happy to come to your church, to your synagogue, to your Islamic center, and speak as information, as informative presentation about what happens in Egypt and what can we do together. But there is a lot can be done. Thank you.
Sorry, I have one more question. Is that all right? Did you want to talk first, miss? 'Cause I can wait for you.
All right. My question is, I do not deny, of course, that the police is creating a state of fear and is kidnapping and doing a lot of violence against students. But what do you say to people who do not think it was a coup? They think it was the will of people who removed the elected president because, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people did go to the streets and protest against the president. And people have said that the elected president had said, if 1,000 people went to the street, I will step down. And some people felt like the new president was giving himself heroic powers, and they felt that, as you said, although Mubarak was removed, the regime was still there, the rest of the pyramid was still there, and they felt like, although it was a democracy and the elected president was elected by the people, they felt that he was just becoming another dictator. And of course, non-Muslims also felt like some of the constitution was being too religious and just violating their rights.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very important question because it is raised a lot in Egypt and outside of Egypt. Even there is a song, if you would like to listen to it on YouTube, it's called Thawra Di Wal Inqilab. It's a really nice song. Is it a revolution or is it a coup? And it is a very controversial issue in Egypt. I understand a revolution will lead to a democracy. A coup will lead to the leader of the coup will become the president. And what we see in Egypt is the defense minister is the one who led the coup is becoming the president. So for me, at least, and for millions of Egyptians, this is a coup. What does a coup do? It suppresses people. I remember I was watching قناة مصر 25, Egyptian TV called Egypt 25th. And I was watching it when the defense minister was making a statement. And this TV belongs to the Freedom and Justice Party that I belong to. And while I was watching it, and the defense minister was still speaking, and they shut down the TV channel. Not only that, they arrested all the people working there. They shut down 11 TV channels. They shut down all newspapers, and they killed thousands. In revolutions, you don't kill your own people. In revolutions, you don't kill thousands. You don't put thousands of people in jail. And the comparison between Morsi and Mubarak is an interesting comparison. There is a big difference between Morsi and Mubarak. Mubarak was never elected. All his elections were fake. Every intelligent Egyptian will tell you that. I know, I lived in Egypt for so many years. I know how they fake election. You know, I and Professor Palumbo run for election. Matthew gets 10,000. I get 5,000. Who's supposed to win? Matthew. In Egypt, no, it's me. And all what they do is just to change the numbers. I get the 10,000, he gets the 5. Can I say no? They put me in jail. So it is that type of democracy we used to have during Mubarak. So Mubarak was never elected. Morsi was elected. Yes, Morsi had opposition because he was elected by around 52%. That means 48% of Egyptians did not want Morsi to become the president. Do people have the right to march in the streets? Of course. Any Egyptian has the right to march in the streets. But no Egyptian is allowed to kill another Egyptian. No Egyptian is allowed to kidnap the president. If it were a revolution, it wouldn't kill the Egyptian. It wouldn't put thousands of Egyptians in jail. The fact is that the African Union suspended the membership of Egypt because it was a coup. The European countries, even the United States administration, until today, yes, there is a section of the US administration that is supporting, but there is another section of the US administration that is not supporting. The people of Egypt, the fact that in 9 months, people are marching in the streets, that tells you there are a large section of people in Egypt who are not happy with the situation. If it were a revolution, it would bring freedom. But what we see is no freedom. We see lots of injustice. A new revolution would bring social justice. We don't see social justice. A new revolution would bring human dignity. We really don't see human dignity in Egypt. It was a transition. Morsi was trying to do his best. But the problem with Morsi's government is the whole system of Mubarak was fighting Morsi. The police, the military, the judiciary, the media, the business community. That's why it was, I don't like to call that Morsi failed, but he was made to fail. Because all these forces were working against him, even if he failed. You know, the ratings for President Obama after the healthcare crisis, you know, it became to 32%. The rating for Morsi was way more than that. Imagine that the military, the American military, because of the ratings of Barack Obama, imagine the following, that the military removes in, kidnaps President Obama, puts him in jail, dismantle the American Constitution, dismantle the US Congress, kill thousands of Americans, and put thousands in jail. Would you call this a revolution or a coup? It's your call.
One more question.
Hey, you do one more?
Yeah.
That's all right? Yeah. Thanks, Chuck. Well, first, I'm just thankful to Jesus that I got a chance to hear you speak today, and my question is kind of on percentages as well. Can you give an example of like Egypt where 49% of the people respectfully disagreed with 51% of the people peacefully and helped create what you will consider a better Egypt?
Can I give percentage?
Yeah, well, like our elections, you know, 51 or 49, but so like I get along with most of the people in the room and that kind of thing. And I guess there's some examples you could give in Egypt where that happens culturally.
Yes. If I understand you right, it is a comparison between what happens here and
if you line up 100 people here, okay, gun control would be a good thing, all right? 51 people say, hey, we should control guns. The other 49 say, no, we should have as many as we want, but all of us get along to America beautiful, that kind of thing.
Yes. The difference is, in Egypt, we had dictatorship for 60 years, military dictatorship. So we did not develop the culture of dialogue. We did not have the culture of agreeing to disagree. It is either me or you. And those who were in power for decades, did not want to let go. They wanted to remain in power. Yes?
So is there an example?
And a particular example for this is we have about 5-6 political parties. They are called secular parties in Egypt, or liberal parties. They lost the election. of the parliamentarian. After we had the presidential election, we had the parliamentarian election. And they lost. They didn't got so many seats. So what they did, they sided with the military against the government that was elected by 51%. Although they lost the election, but they did not respect the election results. And the examples are many in this regard. They support the liberal parties and the secular party, because the liberals are supposed to believe in freedom for all. But what happened? They believed in what the military does. And some of them prefer the military than having a democracy where other people can win the election. And that is the challenge. That is the difference between the situation. Here in America, you have an established democracy. You go to the voting, you vote, but you respect the results. What happened in Egypt, it is very unfortunate. They went to the voting, but did not respect the results. And that's why we are having a crisis. That's unless we as Egyptians agree not only to have a democracy, but also to respect the results of democracy. And that's what matters. Before I leave, I need you to do me a favor. In Egypt, there is a square called Rab'a. Rab'a is the name of a woman who was highly spiritual. She lived all her life loving God. And that is where hundreds of thousands of people gathered. It is very unfortunate that is where a massacre took place. And this massacre, thousands of Egyptians were killed. And I would like to ask you, in support of those people who were killed, and in support for the march of democracy, justice, and freedom, in the spirit of Malcolm X, Rab'a means four. So Egyptians, we raise our right hand with this sign to support the freedom, democracy. So I would like to call upon those who love democracy, freedom, and justice to raise your hand up so that the camera can see us. And I would like to take this photo. I appreciate if someone can take it from the front here so that we know, we tell the Egyptian people that so many people in the world will support their freedom, you support their justice, their road towards peace, and this is what we want. Thank you. Thank you all. Take the photo now. Yeah, here you go. It's an important photo. I will put it on my Facebook so that the people of Egypt can know and see this. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming. We have two more events for today. At 3 o'clock, we have an event on Somalia. And at 6 o'clock, our evening, where we will have all the speakers for today talking about what it means to be a globally engaged person. And at 6 o'clock to 6:30, we will be having food here for you as well. So thank you again for coming.